Welcome, everybody. This is Hugh Massie, the chairman and founder of DNA Behaviour International. And today I'm delighted to be hosting another identity conversation. And with me is Cassandra Govan, and she is the founder of the DEMA agency consultants. And Cassandra is doing a lot of work in the human behaviour area, teaching medical practitioners, fitness trainers, and the like in the health industry on how to deal with their patients better. And I know firsthand, as I said to Cassandra, how important this is, that the communication between the practitioner and the patient is so important. It's everything. So welcome, Cassandra.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, that's a pleasure. So why don't you just tell me a little bit about your life and background and how you got to this place of being a behavioral consultant, doing this wonderful work in teaching our medical practitioners on how to perform better in the patient care side of what they do.
Okay, so I have a background in fitness and nutrition. My husband and I opened a fitness business back in 2001. And he did it for 17 years. I did it for 20 years. But after 20 years, when he got out, I was thinking of what I actually wanted to do. And a consultant from DNA Behavior actually was trying to help me to set the dynamics of my family by uncovering how husbands or fathers behave in a family. Now, because I was a little skeptical and curious, I told her that she needed to do the test on me first. And then once I saw how the test was, I'll allow my husband and my son to test. And when I did the test, I recognized, wow, this is very different and unique. And it answered a lot of questions that I had about myself. And it specifically helped me to decide to get out the fitness and nutrition industry and do something different because I saw that I could. Fast forward, I lost my mom this year in January. And after I lost her to a medical communication issue between herself and her medical providers, I knew that I had a bigger purpose. And that bigger purpose was to actually help with individuals in the medical industry or profession to solve this huge communication and patient outcome issue. And that's how I am where I am today.
Yeah, it's interesting how you go around those corners and you close one door and on a 20-year business, really, and then a major life event comes and it shows you a new pathway.
Absolutely,
it's quite amazing, and it only takes one thing to help push you around the corner to the next thing. So why don't you, Cassandra, tell us just a little bit more about what you're doing with the medical practitioners and how you've been helping them so far? Because I think you said to me before some of them are quite receptive to this. So that's good. We need more of them to be receptive, but just tell us a little bit about what you're doing with them.
Okay, so what I identified is that there's a huge communication issue between the provider and the patient. And what is happening is that it's affecting patient outcomes. And as you may know, that a large percentage of doctors are sued because of communication issues, et cetera, that can really be you don't have to do it as long as they pay attention to a couple of things. So I've identified that really understanding their behavior and their communication style could help them to communicate better with their patients, but also it trickles even down to their staff and how their staff communicates with the medical provider as well as with their patient. So I have had a lot of doctors who are receptive to it because this is a new concept. No one is familiar with genetic natural behavior. They're only familiar with like personality tests level 2, and that's what they've been using to try to solve this issue in healthcare. But after recognizing that hasn't worked for them, they're looking for other things that they can utilize or implement into their businesses so that they can technically solve that problem that they've not been able to solve for years.
So what's the real problem? Is it the doctors are treating all the patients as the same and they just treat them as a number and one in, one out, and they're telling the patient what's wrong, or are they not asking enough questions? Are they not being empathetic enough? Not explaining the options in the healthcare solution, not providing the information? What do you see as the problem in the communication?
So it is a combination of problems. It really depends. I'm recognizing on where the doctor actually works, like medical provider versus, say, hospital, ER, et cetera, right? Where patients are consistently coming in. But let's just talk about the doctors who are medical providers. Maybe they have an actual practice where patients are coming in. I'm looking and listening from the patient perspective and also from the medical provider's perspective and the nurse's perspective. And what is happening is, yes, on some instances, depending on who owns the practices, et cetera, doctors are looking at patients as numbers. So they're not necessarily listening to their problems, and they're too busy more trying to just diagnose, et cetera, and then move on to the next. But from a patient perspective, what is happening is that the patients are saying that they don't feel that they're being heard, and they're not understanding what's supposed to be done from the doctor. So it's causing a lot of confusion as far as how things are being communicated to the patient. Second, some doctors can be very stern or forceful when they speak to a patient, and maybe that patient might be a person who's a little bit more mild or meek, not aggressive, et cetera. So it comes across wrong to them. And as a result, they're scared or terrified to ask the questions. So I realized that if the doctors can understand how it is that they communicate first, then they can use, a certain type of tactfulness, et cetera, when they're speaking to the actual patient in order to help the patient, as well as their nursing staff, technicians, front office staff, et cetera. They can really gear their communication to help those other ones where they're not afraid to speak up and say what they need or want from the provider.
Yeah, I think my own experiences are there's a lot of friction in the whole medical process of from the moment that you go into the doctor's office there and you're at the front desk, whether it's the skin doctor, the eye doctor, neurophysician, as I was saying to you, I've dealt with this for my daughter. It can be pretty rough handling from the moment you get in there, and you're already tense and under pressure because you're concerned about what might be happening or for the reasons that you're there. And as a patient, that gets you into a bad mood at some level. And therefore, either you're going to shut off and not hear things properly and process information properly, or you might be aggressive, or the doctor comes in being a bit aggressive and they're hurried and they're trying to push through to the next patient. And they're not listening to their own intuition or seeing what's going on either. That sort of, so you're talking potentially a catastrophe.
Absolutely.
Sitting there, because at the end of the day, everybody's got to be cool, calm, collected, relaxed, centered, and be able to ask questions, both sides. That's the thing. And dentists are another area where this is a huge problem as well. I've encountered the problem there, as well.
Gotcha. And I think too, Hugh, because, being a doctor, et cetera, having a practice, to an extent, it is a numbers game. So you can't please everyone. But I think even thinking about like the situation with my own mom, sometimes doctors too can label patients, and the labeling of the patient can actually allow them a bias where they're technically are misdiagnosing or not diagnosing at all, or just technically just kind of saying we're just going to brush it under the rug as if the problem doesn't exist. And as a result, again, that patient outcome becomes an issue. So when patients see the medical provider and say if you have to go to a hospital because you have something wrong, it's even affecting their hospital readmission rates. And what is being said today is that if I go to the hospital and I have an issue and the hospital or the doctor doesn't correct that issue and I come back within 30 days, they're going to have an issue with my insurance billing me for being there again for the same problem. And I look at it that if they can just settle this by just taking a little bit of time to understand, am I one who rushes through the process, or can I take my time and actually explain the process so that the patient understands when they leave and we don't have to worry about them coming back. So it's just, the healthcare industry is huge and it's just so many problems. And I think that a lot of the things that they're doing and that they're using are antiquated, outdated, et cetera. And they have to be open to saying, let's try something new and different in order to get a better result.
Yeah, I think if doctors really knew the variability that's sitting there in the diagnosis of patients, it's quite scary that, if someone's MRI scan or x-rays have been sent to pathology, what the randomness in terms of the diagnosis that can come back of very much the same problem. And you've got experts looking at it.
Exactly.
And, that is extremely scary, but this can be solved. This problem can be solved with greater behavioral awareness, as you say, for a doctor to slow down, be in a calmer state, get somebody else to look at it as well, run a committee, have processes. That's all important, but also there's got to be scope in there for the patient to challenge.
Exactly.
Or have a discussion.
It's interesting how you said have someone else to look at it. So I'm working with a patient who's also in the medical profession, and the patient, doctor, ran through instructions for how to get her off of her type 1 diabetes medication, her insulin. She didn't understand it. So she wrote down what the doctor said, but she didn't want to ask the question because of how the doctor quickly went through the information, almost like they were impatient. So she went home and tried to administer what the doctor said, but another doctor was listening through the wall and decided to call to ask, hey, it didn't sound like you understood the instructions. And then they took the time to explain the instructions to the patient. Well, the patient ended up switching the doctor because it's kind of like, well, I didn't feel comfortable to even ask my doctor the questions because they were so quick to just communicate and tell me and not wanting to know if I really understood. But even for doctors, when you lose a patient, you're losing part of your money. So just being more aware of how you're showing up and how you're speaking to them can also, for some patients, they may stay, but can you imagine if the patient went home and just did everything wrong as far as the medication was concerned, what that outcome could have been? So even just looking at it from a completely different perspective to see why it is so important to understand how they're communicating and how they're showing up for these patients when the patients are coming to their offices or seeing them in emergency rooms, et cetera, could help them to save a life, do the right things as far as medication is concerned and make a difference in the patient's life.
So Cassandra, we've talked about, the work you're doing, and I think you've opening up a really important area of being patient, doctor-patient care, the services in this area, and it's something we do a lot of work with financial planners in exactly the same area, wealth management around people's money, which is obviously the other thing that people care a lot about aside from their health. But it's fantastic to see someone take this on in the healthcare industry, I think. But let's just talk about your behavior as well, because that's important. And just for our listeners, Cassandra has completed our business DNA discovery, and she's an initiator style, quite what I would call take charge, but extremely creative as well and fast paced. But when you completed it, what did it bring out for you, Cassandra? Because you did say earlier that, it gave you some light bulb moments in a few areas and clarifications for you and your husband. So just shed some light on that.
So I'll start in my business of being a fitness and nutrition business owner. After I did it, I kind of recognized why clients used to say certain things to me, like, why do you always create so many different programs? Like, why are you always changing things? And I'm like, I don't know. I just look at the next best thing. But like you said, I was so high creative that I realized like, oh, that's the reason why I'm always transforming and doing something different. Now, as far as my relationship with my spouse, my husband and I have been together since we were 16 and 18 years old. Since the beginning, we've always had a problem with each other doing two things. It wasn't until I did my behavior. We were going through a very bad patch in our marriage last year. And I said, you know what? We're coming up on our anniversary. Instead of us doing anything for our anniversary, this is what I would like to do. Let's get on social media and do an uncovering of our own behavior. Now, even though I did this, I never really necessarily looked at his for problems, but I was curious to know if there was anything that we were doing in our marriage or that we've always done that kind of would like stick out to us. So I will never forget, I gave my husband my one-page factory report and I took his and we said, what do you see on the factory report that stands out? My take charge stood out because my husband has always said that I'm very bossy and I always have to tell people what to do. And I'm like, I'm quiet, I'm reserved, but that showed and it stuck out on my report. And on his report, I've always complained like, why do you always feel it's necessary to like entertain people or to talk to people that you don't know, et cetera, and just say things? And his outgoing personality stood out extremely high. And do you know, after we saw that on our behavior, we were like, this is it. No more will we argue and fight about these problems, because we recognize you can't pay us $1 million to change it. So we just accepted it. And it's like things went back to normal instantly.
Yeah, I think it's good to go through that exercise in with a positive mindset, and to be able to come out and say, yeah, I'm not going to change the person. And, I'd always use 3 words around this: understanding, acceptance, and respect. And if they're there, it doesn't matter what the relationship with it is, whether it's in the family, at home, business partners, doctors and clients, if advisors and clients, if that's there, then trust can be built.
Correct.
Obviously there's some character things, or people do, commit infidelities around money and, in other areas that, make that maybe not possible. But if you get these parts right, that stops a lot of those things happening.
Correct.
But I think the understanding, acceptance, and respect's good, and be able to some degree, to be able to laugh it off, and to know that's what's going on. He's just being his way. If he's going out there talking to everybody in the restaurant, okay, but there's a time to dial it back as well. But there's a time for you, for example, to talk up, or to lay off. Maybe providing instructions, at times, and cool it off. I mean, that's what it is. But the awareness of this is then what enables you to modify it.
Correct. Absolutely.
And how have you seen this come out in your dealings, for example, with the medical practitioners, and in your work? Just your own, how you've used these strengths that you have, because you are creative as well. And maybe that's what the medical profession needs, is somebody who can step in and see it a different way, the delivery of service or patient care a different way, and get them to take action. So how do you motivate them to take action and have the confidence to do it?
So a lot of times in the healthcare industry, it's more about validation and facts. So it's very hard to say, oh, well, in fitness, I did this. They can care less. They want to know, okay, based on the product that you are using, can you prove it? Like, what do you actually have to validate it? So majority of the time when I speak to anyone in the medical profession, even though I'm a creative and I'm like, oh, we can create all these great things, I know that there's a time and place for everything. And that industry is not the place. So I can be creative as far as how I speak to them, how I create like my pitch decks and things like that. But when it comes to speaking, I literally like follow an entire process so that they all get the same information. Because another thing is they're connected. I don't care if they're international, or here, a lot of them know each other and talk. And I've known that my name has come up even amongst them from different places. And it's like, oh, you guys know each other. So yeah, always being very consistent and speaking based on what can be validated and what can be proven is the only thing that I see works in the healthcare industry, regardless of my creativity.
But have you seen ways for them to change maybe a process in the setup of their office, or how people are approached? Just, lighten things up. Of course, there's the evidentiary side of all of this, just the fact that of the DNA behavior itself, which is highly validated, but just getting them to see there's a different way to, manage the patient flow, for example.
Yes. So for the doctors who have taken the test and who have given me the opportunity to actually speak to them, even the nurses or nurse leaders, a lot of them see a lot of value in it. And they've all admitted that this is nothing that exists in the industry of healthcare. They've never seen it before, and that it works. And now, because I like the fact that they now have seen that it works, because now they're more ready to back me to really make it bigger than what it actually is for me. So just to have that validation from them, for them to put it in journals and to do other things to show like, hey, it works. Our industry truly does need this. And then for them to see how I've had several recordings of how they say that, wow, even one session like literally changed even some of their own biases and things that they were struggling with themselves, and to see how they were actually coming across to patients and to their staff, and how instantly they started to make that transition in their own life.
So, Cassandra, when have you been most successful in your life and career? You know, what's been happening when you are operating at your best?
Oh, so I am an overachiever in everything. I have different spurts. I was extremely successful in fitness, but I think I look at success differently. So when I was in fitness, I looked at success more of what I can create and the impact that I can make to the people who I was working with. And then of course, how much money I actually could make doing it. So that was great. Whereas today I look at more of my success based on the impact that I can make in a specific industry that really has a need that technically is lacking right now. No one is in the space. So I look at it as a success when I can enter into that space that no one has entered into, because I love being a first at things. I created a lot of firsts in my fitness industry, and I like creating first. To me, that's a success. So being able to be the first that really wants to make a difference as far as the healthcare industry is concerned, using behavioral insight, to me is a success.
But what? Yeah, so in a way, because you're the first to be doing it and bringing this to patient care service, that's a win in its own right. That you've actually got the doctors to listen and want to do it, and their teams. But go back one step. Okay. When you're in the fitness industry, what was a success for you? What was a specific event or action that you took, or a way in which you delivered a service that was really successful, that you just walked away so proud? You knew that this, if you kept on doing this, this is the winning streak. I mean, you were in business doing this for 20 years. So there's something that you did in the fitness industry that was absolutely fantastic, that in a way, okay, with the behavioral tools, you can bring into the medical industry.
Okay, I got one for you. So I competed for my first time because the women clients used to always come in our gyms and they couldn't lose weight. And I never understood, like, why do they say that? Because I was never into fitness. So I decided to do a competition. I did it. After I did the competition, I created an entire transformation program around it. So it started out for women and eventually it ended up for men. That was the most successful thing that I've ever done, because I had women like from around the country who would sign up to actually do it. They would do it online. And then I also decided, hey, there's no competition stage technically for women or men who make transformations. It's only for bodybuilders, etc. So I decided I'm going to create my own competition stage. So I created a competition stage also that was national. So people would come in from different states to actually compete on a stage that I created for transformation. That was the biggest thing that I think that was the most successful, in that a big international bodybuilding association actually ended up adopting my model because it was so big and so good.
So you built or designed a transformation model and got women of all shapes and sizes, not to be rude, up on the stage, and they could show how they transformed.
Absolutely.
Whether it was from 100 pounds to 250 pounds or 250 pounds to 140 pounds, whatever it was. And then you had judging and the whole lot for it.
Everything. It was run like a professional competition stage.
But you made it a competition so they would take charge of their health.
Exactly.
And
but the competition was against themselves. Exactly. Yes.
So part of the game there was, it's not just weighing in every week and, have I followed my Weight Watcher program or whatever. You've actually got them actively engaged in a transformation program that involves a show of some sort.
Correct. And what's interesting, Hugh, is for those 20 years, it was always one missing piece. And the crazy thing is DNA behavior is the only company that was able to answer that one question I had for 20 years. And the question was, why can't they do it and be able to not only attain it, but sustain it long term?
Yeah.
And what you all did is the only thing that was ever able to answer that question for me, as far as that was concerned.
So putting that in the fitness arena and the competition, just for the listeners, how did the DNA behavior, discovery tools and reporting provide that sustainability?
So what happened is I was transitioning out of fitness, but I still had several customers when I started doing this. So I said, you know what? I'm going to use it in the fitness industry and see how it works. So what happens is you all have different reporting under business DNA, but also under financial DNA that kind of talks more about quality life. And I saw it on myself first, and I was like, that's interesting. My health came up as something I struggle with. Yet I've been in fitness and nutrition for 20 years, but that was my biggest struggle. So I started looking closer at the reports to say, well, why would I struggle with my health? And the answers were clear as day. They were in like my strengths that became struggles. Right. After I identified that, I started using it for all of my clients as well to say, hey, this is where you're going to struggle with getting your results. If you can identify this and pay attention to it and modify it, then you'll be able to manage. And that was what it was. It was the self-awareness that none of us had to understand why we had such an issue with the results and actually getting them and why we needed someone to help us. And once identifying that through the behavioral products, everyone was able then to sustain the results because now they could be realistic with setting the result, which was not what they were doing at first.
So people, so in a way, through the business DNA or the natural behavior discovery, helping people see that they need to do their exercise in an environment that's fun or that it's competitive or with other people, or in fact, for some by themselves, or they just need a lot of personal instruction or to do it in groups. Some, they like different programs. I found when I had a trainer at one point, I didn't like the fact that I got a different training program every time I saw him because he was trying to invent a series as opposed to I just wanted to know on Tuesday I'm doing X and then Thursday I'm doing Y and keep at it so that I could practice or keep doing it outside of the class and not be the guinea pig for new stuff, you know. Exactly. So again, and ultimately he lost me as a client. So really it's around the behavior provides the lens that connects to people's perspectives on this. And if you can see that, you can motivate them.
Correct.
To keep on with it and to make it fun. I always need a little goal. If I have a goal of some sort, I can do anything. And then if I'm enjoying it, it's no problem. And so I get that. So now you've got to find that how to do that in the patient care industry.
And but do you see yourself connects? I was saying it almost kind of like connects the same. Because it doesn't matter like what industry you're in or what you're doing. If you're the patient, if you're the provider, all of us have those strengths and talents and biases and those, the struggles and stuff that we have. And it's just a matter of really being able to identify them and accept them and say, where can I do better? So yeah, like you said, take charge. It's a strength, but it's a struggle as well when I'm taking charge of everything and I'm not giving other people the opportunity. And now that I know that so much about myself, I know that I have to check myself a lot of times and kind of like step back because naturally I'm going to do it. And I just feel that it works like that really for anyone, client, patient, employee, medical provider. It doesn't matter who you are. Self-awareness is like where it starts.
So the big message is self-awareness, how you create transformation, a program. So as we sort of build on that, Cassandra, and wrap up, how do you see your identity in the future? How do you want the world to see you, remember you, particularly in this phase that you're going through right now of working with medical practitioners, patient care area?
I think if I had to think of a legacy, it would be that she paved the way. I made a way for other people. I always think that it's important in how you touch people and change their life. And I would want them to know how Cassandra changed their life. That would be like my living legacy, that I made it, I did it, and I'm a big person. When people tell me I can't do something, it becomes like literally I'm infatuated and tunnel vision where I'm just on that to prove to myself, do you really have limitations? No, you don't. You can do that. So I want to be known as the person who, when people say you can't make things happen and you can't do that in healthcare and you can't do this in your life, to show them that you absolutely can, but it starts with changing how you think to make it happen.
So a lot of it's around motivating patient care transformation at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
And that means you've got to motivate the doctor particularly to lead it.
Yes. And
So
if they take the test, which majority of them do, when they take the test, I know there's skeptics normally coming in because in healthcare, they only want stuff from people who are in healthcare. But once I get them to take the test and they hear the behavioral style and then they set the call up to actually talk to me, that is when I hook them every single time. If I can get them on the phone to let me go over their results, then they are believers that it is actually the truth. And they can see how I can actually transform, because I just put it all in that consultation.
So as I wrap up, just to wrap up, Cassandra, so thank you for this. This has been very insightful and motivating, because I'm just so excited someone's doing the work you're going to do in the healthcare industry. But is there any sort of one last tip you want to give our listeners before we sign off?
Well, the only tip would be take the assessment. Find out what's actually driving you to behave the way that you do, regardless of which industry you're in. And I can guarantee you it will change your life. 31 plus million people have done the assessment. Their lives have changed. Yours can change too.
Thank you, Cassandra. There's no better testimonial than that. So everybody get out there and get your own DNA natural behavior discovery done at dnabehavior.com. So thank you, Cassandra. It's been wonderful having a conversation with you today.